بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فلما أسلم وتله للجبين وناديناه أن يا إبراهيم قد صدقت الرؤيا إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين. صدق الله العلي العظيم، وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Dearest brothers and sisters, elders, guests and scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The Prophet Ibrahim has been mentioned in the Quran by name roughly around 70 times, more than most other prophets, except for the Prophet Musa and the Prophet Isa. And Ibrahim is known as the patriarch, the forefather of monotheism, and he is given a special status in the three main monotheistic faiths: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And his story is narrated in detail in the texts and scriptures of those faiths. And many of us know the story of the Prophet Ibrahim and the struggles that he had to go through, but when we examine his life, we can answer the question of how do we correlate between faith, knowledge, and action within Islamic behavior. When you look at Ibrahim, the Prophet Ibrahim, what is outstanding of Ibrahim is, number one, he had faith. We know that he had faith, because if he did not have faith, he would not have done what he did. He would not have had the strength to go against some of his own family members, his own people, his own community. He would not have the strength to then leave his people and go and build something somewhere else and leave a legacy behind. His strength undoubtedly came from his faith. And his faith came from the fact that, number one, he was a prophet of God, he was a representative of God, and so he had revelation that he received from God. And that revelation, some of it came in the form of dreams that he saw, such as the commandment to sacrifice his son Ismail, where he saw in the dream a number of times repetitively that he was sacrificing his son. And he took that as a sign, a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But first he consulted with his son. Of course, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it is not Ismail, it is Ishaq. This is one difference. Another difference is that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the son, Ishaq, doesn't know what's going on when his father is about to sacrifice him. And the story is outlined in the book of Genesis. In the Islamic account, however, he asks his son, he says, "What is your opinion? This is the dream that I am seeing." And his son participates. He volunteers. He's a willing participant in the act of the sacrifice. But before all of that, let's study the life of Ibrahim, because you see that in order to do what he did, he had to have vision. He had to be able to see beyond his circumstance. He had to have faith. And he had to be knowledgeable. And then, based on what his faith provided him with and what his knowledge provided him with, he finally took action. Now we begin by saying this, that everything begins with vision. Everything begins with an idea. Anything that is created begins with a plan and a vision and an idea to create that thing. If you look at countries today, countries or companies or corporations, or even ourselves as human beings, our creation was an idea. It was visualized by our parents, and then there was a plan. The same goes for anything which is great, any organization that you see. When you sit inside an organization such as this, a center such as this was once, before it existed, it was an idea. One person or a group of people had an idea to create something. The chairs that we sit on, this minbar, everything, our clothes, this was all an idea that was born in somebody's mind. That idea then becomes vision. You can visualize. You have to be able to visualize, correct? Today when you build a building, such as this building, an architect doesn't just come and starts randomly throwing things together and hopes that it comes out as a structure with specific parameters, and it's going to be sound, it's going to be structurally sound and architecturally sound. It doesn't happen like that. There's first what? A blueprint. And the blueprint shows the specifics. If any of you are involved in construction, or if you have seen constructions, when they construct high-rise buildings, if you've seen the blueprints, they have these large scrolls, some of which are hundreds of pages, and they have dozens of those, maybe hundreds of those, for one building or one skyscraper. This means that first it was an idea, and then it became visualized, and then the plan was put in motion. Now sometimes we don't see the vision very clearly. For instance, we want to do something in our life, but we don't see the vision very clearly. Or, more importantly, if you look at it in another way, we're told to do something, but you cannot see the result. Such as what? And this is a very relevant question if you think about it. Because when we grow up, and when we are growing up, our parents tell us to do certain things. They recommend that we do certain things, such as praying. And sometimes you don't see the effect of the prayer right away. You don't see how it's going to affect your life. Or fasting, or hijab, or doing well in school. You don't see the effect right away. You don't understand what it is, how it's going to affect you. But you do it because you have faith. Once you begin to understand everything maturely, you understand that if I do these things with faith, then I'm going to see an outcome. And who better to lead the way of that example other than the prophets and the imams? And Ibrahim is a prime example. Because if you look at his story, to do the things that he had to do, he had to have vision. To destroy the idols that his community was worshipping. To go up against the tyrant and Namrud, he had to have faith, and he had to have strength, and he had to have vision. To build the Kaaba, to lift the foundations of the Kaaba and build upon the foundations of the Kaaba, he had to have vision. And maybe he couldn't see all of those things right away, but he executed his game plan. He executed the plan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put forth. So number one, it starts with vision. And that's why we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to do something great, we have to have vision. You know, it's very interesting if you talk to children, you know, when they're at age 6, 7, 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, what's one thing that you notice about children when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do? Or what do you want to have? They have vision. The world is their oyster. Have you ever asked a child, what do you want to have? And then they come up with a mediocre response? Never. They usually want something grand. If you ask a child, they say, I want to marry the most beautiful woman, and I want to have the most beautiful children, and I want to drive the fastest cars, and I want to own a yacht, and I want to have my own business, and I want to become a multi-millionaire, and I want to give to charity, and I want to support causes, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. Most children, if you ask them, they'll tell you that this is what their vision is. This is what their vision for their life. But what happens? as we grow older, we're faced with the big R, reality. We're faced with challenges. And what happens when we're faced with challenges? Instead of asking ourselves, what do I need to do in order to grow so that I can accomplish that vision that I had when I was younger, you begin to shrink your vision. You begin to shrink your dream. You begin to say, well, maybe I don't need to set up that orphanage. Somebody else is going to do it. Why? Because I have a job right now. I have to go out, I have to go to school for 8 hours, or I have to go to a job for 8 hours, and after that I'm tired. I just want to sit home and play computer games, or I just want to sit home and play video games, or watch Netflix, or whatever people do these days with their leisure time. And so you begin to shrink. What happens to that vision that you once had? It begins to shrink. It begins to get smaller and smaller, and you begin to compromise. And all of the good things that you wanted, now whether it's material or non-material, it doesn't have to be material things. Sometimes it's non-material things, such as marrying a good person. This happens a lot, unfortunately, is we have a dream that we're going to, and when you're not married, correct, and the non-married people here, you can agree with this, you always imagine, what's my future spouse going to look like? Who is going to be my future spouse? What are my future, and if you don't have children, you think, what are my future children going to look like? And then unfortunately, and I've seen this happen, of course, is because we realize that you actually have to go out and fight for something. And what does this mean? Specifically in the case of marriage. I won't talk about this for too long because we'll talk about this in one of the coming nights. But in the case of marriage, for instance, you realize that you have to go out and fight for something. What does that mean? That means that you have to be the proper person first. You have to work on yourself so that you can attract the right person. But we find that that's too much work to do. So what do? We begin to compromise. And this is why you have today relationships, unfortunately, that don't last for a very long time, where people don't find themselves in a state of happiness because they compromised. Because it was too much work to work on myself. It was too much work to do dua to Allah to bring the right person in my life. So I'm going to settle for something which is less. And when we talk about having faith and having vision, we need to understand this, that you don't have to dumb down your vision just because there are challenges in your life. Look at Ibrahim. And we'll go a little bit into detail about what were some of those challenges. And then you take it further and you look at the life of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What was his mission? Imam Hussein clearly stated his mission. And many of you have heard this statement before. He says in a letter that he keeps behind with his brother Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya in Medina, what does he say? إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا ظالما ولا مفسدا. That I did not rise out of just whatever, just because I wanted to. Because it was the cool thing to do. Because everybody else was doing it. Well, certainly nobody else was doing it. But I didn't do it because of fame. I wanted fame, or I wanted popularity, or I wanted authority and power. إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح. I rose for the sake of seeking reform. So that was his mission. That was his vision. Now, was it going to be easy? He understood that it wasn't going to be easy. Because for many years, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, for the first few years of his life, it was during the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then after that, challenges, after the life of the Prophet, challenges and difficulties arose for the Ahlul Bayt. And even when his own father eventually became Khalifa, became Caliph and ruler of the Muslims, there were more challenges that they had to face. And after the martyrdom of his father, even more challenges during the time of Imam al-Hasan. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he knew exactly what the challenges were. But he didn't, like most human beings, like most people today, he didn't say, oh, because I risk death, and I risk my companions dying, and I risk my family members being killed, and I risk this, and I risk hunger, and I risk thirst. Because this, I'm not willing to pay the price, so what am I going to do? I'm going to make my vision smaller. Did Imam Hussein do that? Not at all. In fact, the more challenges that Imam Hussein alayhi salam saw, the larger his vision grew. And that's exactly what leaders do. That's what it means to first have faith and then correlate that with knowledge and action. So faith is the beginning point. Faith is having vision, knowing what you want for your life. And some people, when we talk about having big dreams, what do they say? Their excuse is, well, I don't want a lot of things. I don't want a big house. I don't want a mansion. Why are you only thinking about yourself? That's what happens when we only think about ourselves. We say, I don't want this. What about what you can do for other people? You live in a country where you are free to think however you want, to say whatever you want, to do whatever you want. You live in a country which is full of opportunity. And then when someone tells you, why don't you dream big or why don't you act big? You say, because I don't want. Baba, forget about what you want. What can you do for other people? Are you so selfish that you only think about yourself and what you do for yourself? You don't have to only think about yourself. Think about the possibilities of helping other people. The things that you thought about when you were 10 or 11 or 12 years old. So it begins with that. It begins with a vision. You have to have a big vision. And then knowledge. Your knowledge translates into a plan. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he knew exactly what his plan was. And then, after that, of course, comes our behavior. How do we follow through with our behavior? How does that reflect through our behavior? So let's go back to the story of the Prophet Ibrahim. Ibrahim is mentioned a number of times in the Quran. The first time that he is mentioned, it's in the following context, that Ibrahim was born in a society where paganism and idol worship was common in ancient Mesopotamia. And Ibrahim, the way that it is described is that Ibrahim himself never prostrated to the idols, was not a pagan, and from his earliest days was a Hanif. This is what the Quran describes him. The word that is described, that describes Ibrahim is the word Hanif. And Hanif roughly translates into a monotheist. And this was the path of Rasulullah and some of his family members and some of his companions before the advent of the religion of Islam. Is that even though they were within a society of idol worshippers or polytheists, they themselves were not idol worshippers. They were hunafa, meaning that they were monotheists. They only worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what happens, many of us know the story of how Ibrahim comes up with the plan to destroy the idols. Now imagine, sometimes we read these stories, but then we don't really put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we admire so much. Ibrahim, someone that not even Azar, who in the Quran it describes as his ab, his father, but narrations tell us that it wasn't his father. He was more like a father figure. He was somebody that raised Ibrahim. He mentored Ibrahim. But narrations tell us that he wasn't his father, meaning he wasn't his biological father. Even he did not follow him. And he only had very, very few followers, if any. Lut, the Prophet Lut, is described as a follower of Ibrahim. But in this specific story, you have nobody following Ibrahim, and then Ibrahim having to tackle idol worship on his own. And so to prove the point, because he engaged first in discussion with them, he would ask them, these idols that you're building, that you're carving out of stone or you're carving out of wood, what benefit do they have? And sometimes we read about idol worship, but today, there's also idol worship. There's also idol worship. It's the people that on TV, they're called idols. It's very obvious. There are people that we follow, there are people that we glorify, that they do not benefit us as much as a mustard seed. the reality TV, the stuff that people are obsessed with these days, the different shows that come out. And you've seen what happens in pop culture. Musicians and stars, these are all idols that don't benefit us, not one bit. However, we dedicate so much time, some people dedicate so much time and so much energy to following something that's not going to benefit you. In those days, it wasn't pop stars, it wasn't reality TV. They had actual idols, which were created out of anything. Mostly they were created out of stone and out of wood. And so Ibrahim would tell them, what is this going to benefit you? And they would warn Ibrahim, Ibrahim, do not be blasphemous. Do not slander. We worship them and they bring us benefit. Until one day Ibrahim got sick and tired. Imagine the courage that it took. And he came up with a plan. He said, I'm going to knock down these idols. When everybody is out during their festival, I'm going to knock down these idols once and for all. And that's exactly what he did. They came back. Who knocked down the idols? Ibrahim says, ask the biggest one. He'll tell you that he did it if he can speak. And later on they realized that the perpetrator himself was none other than Ibrahim. So what did they do? They built a fire. And it's really when you read some of these narrations, it gives you goosebumps of the amount of courage that it took for him, and knowing that there was going to be a consequence, because they told him there's going to be a consequence. If you don't stop, there's going to be a consequence. And they built a fire that was so large. Some narrations say that if a bird was to fly next to it, it would roast, it would become barbecue. So imagine a fire that's that big. They had to, in order to burn him in that fire, they had to, of course, seek a distance, because if you've ever been next to a large body of fire, the larger the body of fire is, the more heat it gives off, the closer you are. So you have to take your distance from it. And they had to take such a long distance from this fire that they had to catapult him in. That was their method. They were going to toss him into the fire. Again, courage, bravery. Azar comes to him during those last moments, and he told him, Ibrahim, I warned you. It's not like I didn't warn you. I warned you that if you would do something like this, that if you went against the gods, that you would be punished. But Ibrahim maintained his total faith. Why? Because he had a vision and because he had a plan. Ibrahim didn't even ask for forgiveness from them. He didn't even have regret or remorse. Because sometimes we begin something big, and then again we see the challenges, and then what happens? We start having regret and remorse, and then we backpedal. How many times have we started on something? We have a big plan. And the most prominent example, I'll just give us a very small example, personal example. When we decide to get in shape and take care of our bodies, and we go and we're motivated in the beginning, and you get the gym membership and you lay out a plan, I'm going to go to the gym this many times a day, or this many times a week, or this many times a month. And then you realize that it's actually hard work, that you actually have to break a sweat, that when you wake up the next morning you're sore, it hurts, but you have to push through that. And most people 1 week or 2 weeks later, because they don't have the patience and the commitment or the intestinal fortitude to keep up with something for that long, what happens? They shrink. They say, you know what? I don't even need this treadmill anyways. I'm healthy. I'm okay. And we become regretful and remorseful. You know what? I wasted that time at the gym. I wasted. I could have been doing something else. Ibrahim was not regretful. He was not remorseful. In fact, if anything, it only increased his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So narrations tell us that as he was being prepared, what happens? And this is where his faith was really tested. That Jibreel comes to him and he tells him, Ibrahim, whatever you want, just say the word. Anything that you want, just say the word. So what does Ibrahim tell him? He says, Jibreel says, I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve you. Ibrahim doesn't say, I'm not in need. He says, you cannot help me. Only my Creator can help me. Only my Lord can help me. And then Jibreel says, okay, well, then speak, then say what it is, and I am the messenger of God. I can convey that to God. Again, what does he say? He says, عِلْمُهُ بِحَالِي يُغْنِي عَنْ سُؤَالِي. God knows what is in my heart. He is my creator. He is my sustainer. He knows what is in my heart. And His knowledge of what is in my heart, it suffices that I don't have to ask. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we decreed, Ya naru kuni bardan wa salaman ala Ibrahim, that we made it a place of comfort. They launched him in and he was protected. It became a place of comfort. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that was the sign of him passing the test. And this is when Allah says about him and Lut, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we rescued him and we rescued Lut. And we took them to another place. So this is one part of the life of Ibrahim, the story of the idols. Another part is the story of his confrontation with whom? Nimrud, a man who had reached such a status in his authority and in his power that he saw himself to have the power of creation. And Ibrahim, again, a young man at this time, he engages in a debate. And Nimrud tells him that I have the power to bring death to that which is alive. Anybody who's in a position of power like that has the ability to do that. He says, Ibrahim says, do you have the power to do the opposite? Can you give life to that which is dead? Again, courage to stand up to somebody who you know can end your life in an instant, can end your life in a second, and can erase your memory. Again, that began with vision, that began with faith. And that faith translated into action. And he was equipped with knowledge as well. So 3 elements, as we said, 3 elements. One is faith, one is knowledge, and one is action. And in order to become successful, you need these 3 things. Then he continues to where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends him, to the valley of Mecca, described as a place بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. This is how Ibrahim describes it, as a valley that is barren. And for those of you who have performed the Umrah or the Hajj and you have visited the city of Mecca, you'll see this, that it's mainly a barren land and it's a valley. You have, the rocks and the mountains, and you have the tunnels which are carved through. It's a valley and it's barren. بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. And imagine yourself in the footsteps of Ibrahim. God tells you that you have to leave your family. You have to leave the community that you know, go to this land which is barren, build a house, and then go on top of the mountain and call people to come towards this house. What kind of faith did that require? What kind of trust did that require? Some of us, we've lost trust in ourselves. We've lost trust in our families. And sometimes subconsciously, we don't declare this ever. We don't dare to declare this. But inside, we've lost trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have enough tawakkul. It's not that we don't know what to do. Because living in this age, you know what to do. But sometimes it's not that we don't have enough brain power. Sometimes we don't have enough heart power. Sometimes we don't have enough courage to do the things that we need to do. So Ibrahim takes his newborn son, Ismail, with Hajar, and he leaves them in this place. And he is directed to build the Kaaba, the house of God, after the foundations were laid. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ. Meaning that the qawa'id, the foundations, were already there. They existed before. They were built before Ibrahim's time. But Ibrahim merely came and he built the Kaaba. Now imagine what kind of faith that took as well. Because today when you want to build, say you want to build a warehouse, you want to build a building, what do you need? You need a blueprint, a specific blueprint. You need a crew. You got to hire a crew. And that crew has to be competent as well. You don't just hire someone that his job is, and for instance, an electrical engineer, you come and tell him to lay the foundations for the cement. Doesn't work that way. You need somebody who is knowledgeable and somebody who is competent. You need a crew. You need materials. You need to know what exactly the plan is. Ibrahim didn't have a blueprint. Ibrahim, the crew was whom? Himself and his son Ismail. And the tools were what? He didn't have the tools which he had purchased from beforehand, the different types of tools. But because he had a strong heart and he had trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of those things were facilitated for him. God gave him the power, him and his son the power to build it. He provided them with the tools. And then what? After he was done with this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, go and proclaim. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. Call the people, and you will find that once you call upon the people, they will come to you. They will come to you on vehicles. And they will come to you from the farthest places across the globe. All you have to do, Ya Ibrahim, is trust me. And that's exactly what Ibrahim did. And from that time until today, you see people non-stop flowing to the city of Mecca. And this is because God blessed the work of Ibrahim, because he had faith, because he had heart. After that came the strongest test of all, and that was the test of sacrifice. We asked him to sacrifice his own son. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَ وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Imagine he took his own son and he laid him out. And he took the knife. And he put the knife and he began with the movement. Imagine how hard it was upon his heart that he's doing the movement and nothing is happening. So he switches the knife over. He thinks it's on the dull side. He switches it over. He tries. Nothing is happening. But he flipped him over, his son. He flipped his son over on his stomach because he didn't want to see the facial expression so that it doesn't prevent him. Imagine how loyal the son was. He says, flip me over so that you don't see my facial expression, so that you don't change your mind. I don't want you to change your mind if you see the facial expression on your son. And nothing happens. He's moving the knife and nothing happens. He tosses the knife. Narrations tell us that it strikes a rock and it breaks in half. The knife can break a rock, but it can't cut through flesh. And at that point, because he had heart and because he executed and because he had trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God says, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا, that you were true to the vision, you were true to the plan, you had unwavering focus. You didn't hesitate just because it was something that was hard. You didn't compromise on the vision that we showed you, the dream, just because it was inconvenient. And that's a great lesson for us to learn. And of course, when we speak in the context of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Hussein is considered the heir, the inheritor. When we read Ziyarat Warith, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Ibrahim Khalilullah. That you are the heir, you are the inheritor. All of the good that we saw in the prophets, we saw in Imam Hussein alayhi salam. 72 companions up against an army of, if we are conservative, we say 30,000. That's the least amount. Some narrations tell us up to 120,000. Imagine, you have 72 people on your side staring at an army of 100,000 people, and it doesn't compromise your vision. So how does this relate to us? Because we're neither prophets nor are we imams. But we can understand the following. Number one is that we have to have vision. As a community, we have to have vision. Whatever goals we have as a Muslim community, those goals are not going to come into fruition unless we actually have a vision. And then the vision is related to knowledge, meaning that you actually have a plan. Only doing salawat and only doing takbir and only doing dua is not going to bring anything together. And number three, action. You have to take action. And that's probably the scariest part for most of us, is to take action. Now, I want to turn our attention to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and on this day, the second day of Karbala, is the day that Imam Hussein alayhi salam arrived to Karbala. After 23 days in the journey, leaving first from Medina and then to Mecca, from Mecca to Karbala, took approximately 23 days. They arrived on the 2nd of Muharram, and before they arrived, in the way, as they were going to Kufa, they were intercepted by a group that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the governor of Kufa, had sent out, and that was led by whom? Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Now Al-Hurr was a man who was in the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, but he was a noble man. He was a man of value, he was a man of principle. When he arrived to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, most of his soldiers were thirsty, they were hungry, they were weak, and they could not put up a fight. So the plan was that we would strike them first, from the camp of Imam Hussein. Let's strike them first so that we end them. Imam Hussein alayhi salam told them that I will not be the first one to engage them in battle if they have not engaged us. And so Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, he comes to the Imam, he tells him, I know who you are, I know who your father is, I know who your mother is, but I have orders not to allow you to enter Kufa. You cannot order, you cannot come in. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he says, well, that was my destination. At the end of the day, Al-Hurr says, I cannot allow you to go to Kufa, but I will not fight you here because I know who you are. فَخُذْ طَرِيقًا نَصَفًا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ. Take a different path. Go on a different path. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he turns to his companions. One of his companions, he is known as At-Tarimah. He is the cameleer. He is the leader of the caravan. He tells his companions, he says, my companions, which one of you knows a different path? At-Tarimah responds, he says, I'm a cameleer, I know a different path. And during those days when the cameleer would lead the camels, he would chant. In the same way you see when a person leads animals, whether it's a horse or another animal, they chant for the animal to move forward. He begins to chant and speak to his camels. يا ناقتي لا تذعري من زجري وامشي بنا قبل طلوع الفجر بخير ركبان وخير سفري آل رسول الله آل الفخر. He's saying to his camels, do you know what kind of cargo we are carrying? This is Ali Rasulullah, this is the family of Rasulullah. Until finally Imam Hussein alayhi salam, much longer after that, many days after that, they arrive in Karbala. And finally Imam Hussein understands that this is the place that we will be at. This is where the camels stop. And so he asks about this place. He knows the name of the place. He is told the name of the place many years earlier. He is informed of where he will be slayed. So he begins to ask, what is the name of this place? They say it is known as Nainawa. Is it known by anything else? Al-Ghadariyat. Is it known by anything else? Finally they tell him the name, and he says, when they tell him the name of Karbun wa Bala, the land of the land which brings misery, the land of calamity, he says, Ashabi, my dear companions, my family, this is where our women will be taken captive. This is where our children will be slain. This is where our men will be killed fighting in battle. And it was only 8 days after that Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi comes to the Imam, and he tells him, after a long struggle, after he sees himself in the dream choosing between heaven and hell, finally he brings the water. He goes to the caravan of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and Imam Hussein sees him. He notices that this is an enemy. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas wants to protect his brother. Al-Hurr comes and he presents himself. He tells him, "Oh Hussein," he says, "it is me, Al-Hurr. I am the one who is responsible for bringing you to this land. I am the one who is now responsible for what is about to happen. Do you see any room for forgiveness?" Imam Hussein tells him that if you ask Allah for forgiveness, you will be forgiven. He is the first one to go out into the battlefield. Narrations tell us that he went out with much valor, with much strength, with much courage, fighting, defending the Imam, until finally he falls down. And his final words, he calls for the Imam. When the Imam comes to the fallen Hurr, he sees that he is bloodied, he is injured. He says to him, "Bakhin, bakhin laka ya Hurr, bravo, O Hurr, that your mother was truly right when she gave you the name of Al-Hurr, meaning a free man. For you are a free man in this world, and you are a happy man in the Akhirah. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. وصلى